and welcome back to my channel. I'm here with another astrology oracle reading for you, and I'm so excited because today's reading is happening on Halloween day. So I have always done these readings on a Monday, and it's just been really incredible to align with so many amazing events astrologically and culturally and socially throughout the year. This is my 33rd episode. How did that even happen? It's so amazing. Thank you to all of my subscribers. Thank you to everyone who likes my videos, who watches my videos. It has been seriously so great just to be able to show up for you all every week and to do this and to contribute this energy. And I love Halloween. I'm an October baby. You can see I got my skeleton earrings on. I have my resting witch face t-shirt on. So I'm here. I'm in the zone. I'm feeling the vibes. Today, of course, I am using an event chart for Dayton, Ohio at 11:11 a.m., just like I always do. And this is giving us a 14-degree Sagittarius rising. We have the moon in Capricorn at 29 degrees at the time of this reading. So perhaps by the time that you watch this, the moon will actually have ingressed into Aquarius, depending on what time it is. But being that this was at 29 degrees and 41 minutes, yeah, definitely for sure, probably by the time that this video publishes, the moon will have ingressed into Aquarius. And of course, it's Scorpio season, so we have an 8-degree Scorpio sun right now. I love Scorpio season. For me personally, all of this Scorpio energy is happening in my 12th house. So I have been having some very vivid, very odd dreams. I've been super tired. And, you know, in terms of just like aligning and connecting with other people and conversations, the synchronicities have seriously been amazing for me in the last week or two, particularly over this weekend. So yeah, again, I'm here for the vibes. I love this time of year. So looking at this chart, we have a lot going on, but when have we not had a lot going on? Am I right? Mars in Gemini is officially in retrograde, so we can just expect Mars to sort of start moving backwards by degree in the sign of Gemini. So look to wherever Gemini falls in your natal chart, and that is where this Mars retrograde is really going to be hitting the most. What Mars retrograde is really going to represent is, with any retrograde, we kind of apply the rule of re's, right? So refocusing, recalibrating, reorganizing, re-strategizing. And when we look at the archetypes of Mars, we're dealing with ego, authority, power, aggression, ambition, anything that's very like masculine almost, right, is very much within that realm of Mars. Now, I do try to steer clear of the binary, but unfortunately, astrology is an ancient practice, and it is very easy to kind of rely on the backbone of the binary sometimes, so please apologize if that is not resonating for you. I do apologize. Anywho, when we also look at the archetypes of Gemini, we're dealing with trickery, mischievousness, definitely a lot of communication, your local community. So when you kind of combine all of these archetypes together, this Mars retrograde is really going to represent becoming very aware of how you use your energy, the way that you treat people, the way that people treat you, how you show up, how they show up. You know, Gemini is a very relational sign. It's known as the twins. And so definitely like personal relationships, possibly business relationships, siblings, people who are like close to you, but maybe not in an intimate way. These people are really going to start, you know, showing up in this archetype, right? So if there are conversations that need to be had, if there's a moment for you to stand up for yourself and you need to take it, just, you know, some things to consider. And you can find so many resources right now about this Mars retrograde. So I'm not going to go any further into that right now. But this Mars retrograde is going to be creating a trine to the moon here in a few days, because anytime that we have a trine, we're seeing a harmonious balance between the same elements. And as I mentioned, the moon will be moving into an Aquarius, which is an air sign. Gemini is also an air sign. We are seeing it as well at the time of this particular reading. So many Pluto squares going on. Pluto is squaring Mercury, Pluto is squaring the sun, Pluto is squaring Venus. And, you know, there is really a sense of like what am I doing? Why am I here? What's my purpose? What do I value? You know, what are my relationships bringing, you know, to the table? What am I bringing into my relationships? Which all, again, very much relates to that Mars energy, that Mars retrograde I just talked about. But there's so much Scorpio energy going on right now. You know, technically the Sun and Venus are still in a conjunction, but Mercury has ingressed into Scorpio and has left Libra, so that has joined the rankings. So we now have a stellium in Scorpio. That is the only stellium that we have right now in this chart, and it's gonna be hanging. I mean, it's gonna be there for a good couple of, you know, a couple weeks that we have to really kind of process and deal with all this scorpionic energy. We also have a lunar eclipse coming up very, very soon. On November 8th. So I'm going to hold off on doing too much analyzing on the lunar eclipse until next week, because we do get a chance to kind of like really focus in on that conversation then, because the lunar eclipse will be happening next Tuesday, and I do these every Monday. You know, a couple other things to note, you know, Neptune and Jupiter are both retrograding in Pisces right now. Whew. That's a lot. You know, Pisces is already such a very mystifying and sort of meta, you know, out of the box thinking, super creative kind of feeling instead of thinking energy. And when we have retrogrades in a sign that is so watery and so easily impenetrable energetically, it can be a little bit just confusing, honestly, especially because Neptune's involved. And Neptune is really great at striking up illusions and grandeur, and, you know, really kind of painting this picture, if you will, and presenting that picture. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, there could be a very different reality going on. Does that sound like that's resonating for right now? Couldn't be. Yeah, Saturn has ended its retrograde. It is now progressing forward into the kind of end tail of Aquarius. It's at 18 degrees right now, and so it's just going to keep moving forward, and it's eventually going to move into Pisces next year. We are also going to see the ingress of Pluto into Aquarius next year. Now, I'm not trying to get too ahead of myself, but within the context of all of these Pluto squares that we see happening, the eclipse coming up, and the fact that we're having some really big shifts coming in the collective next year, awareness, self-awareness, communal awareness, you know, that Mars stuff, it's coming at the right time. I think we really need to be aware of like what we're fighting for, right? Mars is a fighting sign. And, you know, where are you putting your energy? Why are you putting your energy into those spaces? What's the return on your investment? And although those things are very Capricornian at the time of this reading, we are seeing a very mild communication happening between some of those Capricorn placements. And because Mars was at kind of a late degree of Gemini, it was close to Cancer. Not there yet. We will not see Mars move into Cancer until 2023. So, yeah, I think that's kind of a lot. That's kind of enough for now. Like I said, I always use a chart for 1111. It's just really easy for anyone who wants to look at what I'm, you know, reading to check out and track. But if you would like to investigate further, I definitely would. Again, pay attention to where Gemini falls into your chart. Pay attention to where Scorpio falls into your chart. And this will definitely give you a lot of insight on all this heaviness and transforming energy, you know, really what to do with that. You know, it is, I mean, again, I've been so tired. I have been exhausted lately. I even had a migraine for the first time in a while the other day. So yeah, we're all feeling it. We're all feeling it. If you need to take a couple extra minutes to, you know, sleep in, maybe go to bed earlier. Maybe not always you can sleep in. Go to bed earlier. Do what you can to just fortify and restore yourself, which is also a message I've been sharing a lot in my newsletter lately, is pay attention to your self-care practices. I think so many of us, you know, we have been kind of shown what self-care is without really any context. So, you know, self-care is going and getting your nails done or getting a facial or buying yourself, you know, a latte or whatever. Taking capitalism out of the equation and focusing on like the self-care practices that you can do for yourself that don't require you to purchase something, right? So going to bed a little bit earlier, that does not require any money from you. You know, being a little slower in your emotional reaction to things, costs you nothing and gives you so much more peace. So something to consider during these very, very tiring, but also very stimulating times. All right, today's card, funny enough, is Gemini. Look at that. And we have that Mars retrograde in Gemini. So here I am saying, oh, I'm not going to go too much into this. And the cards are like, yes, you are. So in this chart, we are also seeing squares happening between this Mars retrograde and the retrogrades of both Neptune and Jupiter. And the reason for that is Pisces and Gemini are both mutable signs. They're kind of known as the changing, the evolving, the growing signs. And we also have included in that Virgo and Sagittarius as well. But yes, that Mars retrograde is making squares to both of those planets. And because all three of these planets are in retrograde, we're going to really continue to feel the impact of these squares, because they're going to be making these squares as they move backwards. And guess what? They're going to be making these same squares as we move forward. The nice thing about retrogrades is kind of like really understanding that in some ways we are revisiting places, experiences, aspects that we have already experienced. We've been here before, right? Mars has already been at 25 degrees of Gemini. Neptune and Jupiter have both been at their degrees of Pisces, but retrogrades are bringing us back. And so we are being brought back to this Mars and Gemini energy. And when we are done with the retrograde, again, we then go forward into that energy once more. So there's like 3 passes of energy when it comes to retrogrades. And I'm using the word energy just as like kind of a loose filler. Again, it could be experiences, opportunities, fill in the blank, whatever feels right for you. Now, Gemini, again, as I mentioned, it's a mutable air sign. As you can see by the card, it is known as the twins. So both the glyph as well as the visual indicators on this card really back up that kind of duality, that polarity energy that we do tend to associate with Gemini. Now, Gemini so often in charts does represent some form of polarity, extremes. Gemini is not about the gray space in between. It's hot or cold. It's, black or white. It is very, in fact, binary. Funny that I used that word earlier as well. With just this Gemini energy, we are always trying to explore and break out further. So if you imagine the polarities of Gemini kind of on a line graph, they're both trying to go even further out and expanding their minds. And I really think personally that comes from the fact that Gemini is an air sign. It's about communication. It's about, sharing ideas and formulating ideas. Gemini is one of the planets that's ruled by Mercury alongside Virgo, making it very much about our mental faculty. I don't like to go a lot into like medical astrology or any kind of diagnoses. When it comes to these readings or even my personal ones with consultations, it's just not my specialty. There are many astrologers that do specialize in this, and I would very much want you to go and see people who have that credibility behind them. Libra sun, of course. But I will say there are and have been many indicators that I've seen in my research as well as my consultations that Gemini placements do tend to bring with them some kind of bipolar or ADHD, anxiety. And I do think that this is kind of very common, especially the anxiety and the ADHD with mercurial placements. So just throwing that out there, please don't self-diagnose. But I think that again, it comes from that polarity, that constant pushing away from, and so these polarities, they can be so many things, right? They can be comfort and discomfort. They can be conforming and being unique. They can be, what's familiar and the unknown, and continuously trying to push out into those different subject matters is so Gemini. It really is. Gemini is also associated with the 3rd house in astrology, making its counterpart Sagittarius in the 9th house. So, as you guys know, because I'm sure you've watched a few of my videos by now, I love to look at the balancing energy between signs. And so whenever you look at Gemini and you're like, what is the balance to this? What is the, not antidote, but what is the even keel, so to speak, of this very expansive yet polarizing Gemini energy. And you look at Sagittarius, and the archetypes of Sagittarius are higher learning and education and, you know, long distance travel, where Gemini is more short distance travel. And it to me really speaks to that kind of feeding your mind. Geminis want to feed their mind. They want to learn. They want to gather information. Very often they also want to share that information. But even if they didn't, they want to be very, very wise, you know? But because it's a Mercurial ruled sign, there is also a lot of like trickery and deception that can come from Gemini. So, you know, what they're learning and how they're learning it and their environment, I think plays a really key role to how they project that information and project that experience into the world. All right, let's pull out our little booklet here to get a little more into Gemini's archetype. Also, I have to say, because I think that Gemini is perhaps the most misunderstood, if not most hated, of the zodiac signs. I'll maybe give Aries and Scorpio a little bit of a highlight there too, but really nobody is more critical of a zodiac than I think a Gemini is. And I think it's because of that the polarizing energy, that polarity, right? You could be talking, and I'm married to a Gemini, so I know, you could be talking to a Gemini or someone with heavy Gemini placements, and you could actually be on the same side of a conversation or an argument, but the point is you could literally be in agreement of whatever it is that you're talking about, and the Gemini will still disagree with you. It will still argue with you. It will still push a different perspective. You know, I like to say a lot of the times Gemini is the devil's advocate. You know, and I think that really is why it's such a misunderstood sign, is because people see them as very like all over the place, very confusing, very, again, hot and cold, very polarizing. But, you know, really that's there for a much more significant purpose, right? That education and that communication and the community and the interpersonal relationships and everything that Gemini also stands for. But it's not the most comfortable sign. And actually, I don't think that either Gemini or Aquarius are very comfortable signs. But it's interesting because the air signs are the human signs, as they're called, I recently learned. So Gemini is evidence of our humanity. Libra and Aquarius are also evidence of our humanity. But Gemini is... It really reminds us that we are human, we are flawed, we are not perfect, we are all very different, we're all here in this very mass spectrum of who's on what side. And I think in like the political climate that we're in right now, it feels very Gemini. You know, it does. It feels very polarizing, at least here in America. I can't speak for the rest of the world personally, but you know, this Mars retrograde that's happening in Gemini at the same time as the eclipses, at the same time as election day. I mean, as Eliza Kelly would say, there are no coincidences. So, you know, really at a time like this, you know, even in our like political system we have in America here, you know, you're blue or you're red, you know, you're a Democrat or you're a Republican. And the truth is so many of us actually fall within the spectrum of that. We are not on either side, or even if we are, we could maybe even be further out to each side. But this like very polarizing, very strict definition of what we're working with, you know, people don't embrace this. They don't love this because it feels like you're kind of being categorized and kind of put in a box, kind of being organized, if you will. And it just doesn't feel freeing, right? And of course we do at this time still have Uranus in Taurus, which is just like, I want to break free of traditions. I want to change things up. I want to shake up the system. I want people to think about things differently. I want them to relate to each other differently. And I think this Mars retrograde is a nice extra layer on top of that energy to just, you know, again, really, what do you think? Right? I think is the Gemini mantra. And I think at times like this, it's really important to be like, what am I thinking? What are those thoughts that come up for me? What is this inner monologue that I'm dealing with? All right, the quote we have for Gemini is from Bob Dylan. It says, "No one is free, even the birds are chained to the sky." I'm saying communication is key. Be versatile and quick. You may also be mindful because people are talking. Gemini is a charming sign, full of whimsy and fun, ruled by the planet Mercury, named after the Roman god of wit and winged thought. Geminis are chatty and their minds act like quicksilver. Geminis prefer to do things fast, not because they're boisterous, but because they're bored. Things become very tedious and very much not fun for them. Words mean everything to a Gemini. They do adore books, but hardly ever read them in their entirety. What's most important to a Gemini is an exchange of ideas and communication. However, they like to discuss ideas, but they do tend to be poor listeners. Geminis are fascinated by their own thoughts rather than the ideas of others. As Geminis are curious about everything, they tend to be experts on a number of different topics. They also love stories and gossip. Those intelligent minds should always be fed, whether with tales or philosophical pursuits. They usually have a small computer on their person to access social media and play games. I will say all my husband does is play video games, so that checks out. Geminis tend to be insecure in their views. They change their opinions very often. They're not patient. They may not enjoy school for this reason, but they do thrive when they study what they're truly invested and interested in. They have a fickle and dual nature. They can change their minds very quickly. It's what could be true for them today may not be true for them tomorrow. They're easily distracted and highly nervous. Attention disorders can crop up, which I did mention. Gemini is the sign of the brain. They are also the eyes in the nervous system. Geminis have clear, bright eyes that dart around, and they have broad foreheads. They are forever youthful and light on their feet. They do have passions, but they often can't find them. Even though they are a charming sign and have many friends, they can easily also attract romantic partners. If this card comes up, the object of discussion or that you may have to talk your way out of a sticky situation could be relevant. Since communication is key with Gemini, you may find yourself involved with new forms of technology that help you spread your ideas to a wider audience. Such technology could include cameras, computers, tablets, or the next invention to come along. Writing may also figure in, such as creating a blog, writing books, some form of publishing. At the current time, you may find yourself to be highly strung, nervous, or excitable. It may feel as though you are riding a high wind of lofty energy. I personally do not resonate with that because of all the Scorpio energy I have in my 12th house right now. Gemini is related to the Lovers in tarot. This card does indicate important romantic relationships. At the bottom line of all of this, words are important, so use them wisely. It will be imperative regarding the outcome. So, we are in this retrograde period. We're also seeing this super, tense squaring energy between Neptune and Jupiter and Mars. And to me, this energy is really about, expanding consciousness, expanding empathy. But there's alongside that a huge possibility that others will be expanding their arrogance and their selfishness. And it's polarity. That's, really the theme of this week is, if you find yourself running into situations with other people where it doesn't feel like you're clicking, or it feels like you're kind of in an opposition with them, and if it's conflict, it's not smoothed over, it's not harmonious, just remember, all of that nervous energy and anxiety and frustration that you feel, these are indicators of the experience that you're going through trying to teach you some sort of lesson, right? And by God, I think we've learned quite a lot of lessons this year, but we are not done. We're not done. No, that would be too easy. I will say also that in this particular chart I have created for this reading, this Mars retrograde in Gemini is occurring in the 7th house of intimate partnerships. And I think that's really on brand for Geminis, even though it's not always intimate and romantic for Gemini. It can also just be close connections. I think a lot of people's relationships are going to be challenged a lot through this Mars retrograde. Instinctively, I want to say Mercury retrograde. But yeah, I do think a lot of relationships are going to get challenged, especially because, you know, we have both Jupiter and Neptune just really creating a lot of confusion and illusion. Propaganda is super big when it comes to these particular aspects that I'm talking about right now. And we're in the political season. So, I mean, if anything, we as a collective have all been exposed to some form of propaganda. And, you know, just remember, vet your sources, you know, vet your sources, you know, kind of follow the breadcrumbs to the actual beginning of whatever it is that you're studying and researching. And, you know, this Mars and Gemini energy wants you to do that. It wants you to dig deeper. It wants you to have a very intellectual approach to, you know, what are otherwise very visceral, you know, archetypes with Mars. So that is all I have for you this week, my darlings. I'm here for the weirdness, right? Embrace it. That's what it's here for. I'll see you all next week. Bye.